So welcome to the first episode of our Time About the Movies spinoff, Time About the Movies Flashback. Basically what this show is going to be is pretty much the same thing that we do on the regular Time About the Movies, except instead of going forward in time, we're going backwards. We're going backwards in time from just a few weeks before I was born to the past, all the way until a specific date that I don't really have at a complete... I have no real end game for this. This will probably be a thing that we'll do once a week, every week. So every Friday you'll get one of these videos, and that means we're going to be spending most of this first year covering the movies of 1988, and everything from Thanksgiving weekend 1988 backwards. And it's going to be pretty much the same format that we have on the regular Time About the Movie show, except we're going backwards instead of forwards. So quick summary right there. So let's go ahead and get right to it, because we have 6 films to look at here on this first episode on the weekend of Thanksgiving weekend 1988. 6 new releases, and we'll start with probably the best one of the 6 new releases, and that is the Bill Murray Christmas classic, Scrooged.
Holiday season. Bill Murray, yes, Scrooge. I'm going to be visited by 3 ghosts. A ghost? Tomorrow at noon. And tomorrow's bad for the room. Smells like the whole rest of the week is a washout. So don't miss the party. Scrooge. Hey, back off the elevator to the checks to regular. Starts Wednesday, November 23rd at theaters everywhere.
So Scrooge, when it came out, was a pretty interesting film. It was filmed on a $32 million budget over 3 months in Hollywood, which, believe it or not, was a lot of money back in 1988. And Murray, this was his big return to acting in film after he took a 4-year hiatus following the release of Ghostbusters, and then he did The Razor's Edge after that, which was his first dramatic role, which didn't become a big financial hit, but Murray was praised for that particular film. He would have cameos here and there in Little Shop of Horrors, and he worked directly with the writer Mitch Glazer and Michael O'Donoghue from Saturday Night Live after reworking the script before agreeing to join the project. And the project was very tumultuous because Bill Murray and director Richard Donner, who had then just come off of Lethal Weapon, had differing visions on what the film wanted to be. Murray himself described the time on the film as one of misery, while Donner called Murray superbly creative but occasionally difficult. And Bill's brothers are all in this movie. Brian, John, and Joel are all in here, plus a number of different celebrity cameos. In the film, the marketing basically capitalized on his role in Ghostbusters, referencing his encounters with the ghost in both movies, even though Ghostbusters 2 had not been released yet. It was a big hit when it came out, and it did get positive reviews from test audiences at Paramount, but critics were very mixed on it. Critics who alienated ultimately found the film too mean-spirited or too sentimental. But in the years since its release, it has gone on to become a regular feature on television at Christmas time. It's seen as as an alternative to more traditional Christmas films, and others argue that Scrooge was ahead of its time, allowing it to remain relevant in the modern day. And you can definitely tell. I mean, he's working at a TV studio where they keep talking about how we can not only appeal to humans, but also different animals too. Like the head of the network basically talks to Bill Murray about programming for dogs and cats, and they literally show them watching the Scrooge Christmas special, and you see the cats and dogs watching it. And nowadays we have channels like that, like the Animal Planet, and all these different channels centered specifically towards dogs and cats. I mean, this and Gremlins 2 were very much ahead of its time, and coincidentally they both feature John Glover in this film. But you also have Karen Allen, John Forsythe, Bobcat Goldthwait, Carol Kane, Robert Mitchum, Michael J. Pollard, Alfre Woodard. A really phenomenal cast, and to me, this is one of my favorite Christmas movies I like to watch every year. If you've watched my stuff for the longest time, you know that one of my favorite stories of all time is A Christmas Carol, and I love many of the adaptations of the story that story has been made into all the different versions, from the Jim Carrey one, to the Mickey one, to the Muppets one, the Flintstones one. I mean, there are so many great ones that, I mean, honestly, I could do just a list of the 10 greatest Christmas carols of all time. Actually, that's not a bad idea. I should write that down when I'm done with this. But this is probably my second favorite adaptation of A Christmas Carol. It's a nice twist on the classic story. The head of a major TV network is the Scrooge in the movie, and is played by the always enjoyable Murray. And you have a strong cast, some pretty good special effects for the time. This is still when they used practical effects on a number of different areas. You barely saw CGI in this, even though that was slowly but surely gaining an edge here and there. They're really good too. I mean, this is just a film that, it's a different twist on A Christmas Carol, but it's done so well. It's a classic film. It's definitely ahead of its time, but it's something that I go back to every holiday season. I love this movie to death. I love this movie. I can't recommend it enough. Scrooged, if you have not seen it, check it out this Christmas. You will not be disappointed by it. So, on to the next movie, and that is Cocoon: The Return.
Maybe it would help if you talk to someone about this thing.
Mom, I don't need to see a shrink. They're not dead. They really did go to another planet.
David, your grandparents are not in space. They were lost at sea. They've been dead for 5 years.
Hello, darling.
Fun fact, that was actually 20th Century Fox when they saw the opening weekend box office results of this. Of course, this is a sequel to the 1985 movie Cocoon, which kind of leapfrogged Ron Howard's directorial career. And you basically have everybody coming back from this movie. Art, Ben, and Joe are back, so are the Wise and good friends Bernie in their first adventure since the last film. It's been 5 years since the senior citizens blast off into space, with them returning to Earth because their alien friends have to collect the rest of the cocoons in the ocean, believing to be in danger from an earthquake. So Ben and Marion visit their family, Art and Joe visit Bernie, who's still hanging on, and they've all forgotten what it was like on Earth and immediately begin to feel their weaknesses, except for Art's wife, who's pregnant. Meanwhile, in the ocean, you have this biologist company snatching a cocoon out of the ocean and doing research on it. And you can kind of tell where that's going to go from there. And it's a shame that this movie is not as good as the original Cocoon. The original Cocoon is a very well-made film, and it really works because of the direction of Ron Howard. Like, once you take him out of this, it doesn't quite live up to those same standards. There are some fun moments here and there. There's some good laughs here or there. It's great to see everybody back in here. Even Brian Denny, he came back for this, specifically saying that he would agree to be part of a 3-minute scene at the film's end. And he basically said no salary. He accepted no salary and appeared only as a favor to the castmates of the movie, which that's actually pretty cool of him to do that. But you could definitely tell that this was a sequel clearly made to cash in on the first film, and it's not a bad movie, but it just suffers really from sequelitis. It's a film that's been seen done to death over and over again. I mean, it's the same story as the first movie. It's not as strong. It's not as well written, and the only thing that really does get it by is the commitment by the cast themselves. You can tell they wanted to come back for this, and even though the script wasn't that good, you can still feel their presence there, giving the movie that oomph that you would need to give this a little bit more of an enjoyment factor to it. And I think they did a very good job with that. And I think that does keep the movie from being a terrible film overall. It's just a mostly forgettable movie, honestly. But, yeah, it definitely suffers from sequelitis. It's a film that's definitely not as good as it should be, considering the first film and what that was. But you get to see an early Courtney Cox in this as well. But yeah, overall, not a bad movie, but definitely not a film that's worthy of needing to exist. I think the first movie just works as fine as it does. You should have just let it go from there, but they made this. It wasn't the worst thing ever, but at the same time, I have no real desire to ever go back and watch it. Yeah, it's a shame because because it does have those little brief moments of flashes of promise there, but other than that, not much there to really recommend about it. Cocoon: The Return. So, let's go to the next movie, Phil Collins' feature film debut, and that is Buster.
Phil Collins in his motion picture debut as Buster.
And somewhere a young black man in Bedford basically saw that and said, you know, if some crazy stuff goes on in my town, I just need to throw a garbage can into a window, and it's going to make everything all right. Obvious reference to Do the Right Thing there, but that's the first thing I thought about when I saw that bit there. But like I said, this is basically Phil Collins' leading film debut. It's based on the events of the Great Train Robbery, in which $2.6 million was stolen from a Royal Mail train heading from Glasgow to London. That was back in 1963, so 25 years before this movie came out. And you also have Julie Walters in this film as well. So Phil Collins basically plays the small-time crook who puts in a big-time job. He finds out the police will not let the case drop, and he goes into hiding and can't contact his wife and child. And he arranges to meet them in Mexico, where they think they can start fresh, but finds that he must choose between his family and his freedom. And it's very interesting how Bob Hoskins was considered for the role for this, but he turned it down for Roger Rabbit, I think. But it's very interesting how that works, because when you watch this, you could definitely tell Phil Collins was channeling a lot of Bob Hoskins in this movie. Like, you'd swear it was him for almost some brief flashes in this movie, but it wasn't. And as far as the movie itself goes, Phil Collins wasn't bad in it. It's just a film that doesn't really have a whole lot there to really make it work. But it does show at least Phil Collins has some potential as an actor in a movie, as he'd later show in a couple of other films down the road. But other than that, though, there's not really a whole lot there except for the music and a decent performance by Phil Collins. But other than that, though, it's fine for what it is. But again, nothing really spectacular or something that makes you need to see it. If you just want to watch it for curiosity's sake because of Phil Collins, I mean, that's probably about it. But other than that, though, I wouldn't really go out and rush out to see this movie. Just listen to the soundtrack, because the soundtrack, of course, is going to be really good. I mean, Groovy Kind of Love. This came from the movie Two Hearts. I mean, some great music on the soundtrack. I mean, that's one of the only reasons to really go see this, for Phil Collins' acting and the soundtrack. I mean, but other than that, that's about it. So anyway, that is Buster. So on to the next movie, Gene Hackman and Terry Garr in Full Moon and Blue Water.
Gene Hackman, Terry Garr, Burgess Meredith.
Take it easy, old timer. Don't you old timer me.
He's death. Full Moon in Blue Water.
So in Texas, you have Gene Hackman playing this owner of a decadent bar near the coast, and he misses his wife Dorothy, who's played by Becky Ann Baker. I thought it was Terry Garr for a second, but he does not pay attention to business, giving credit to everybody. His senile father-in-law, the general, is played by Burgess Meredith, lives with him demanding care, and he has two employees, the former inmate of a mental institution, Jimmy, and the spinster Louise, who is played by Terry Garr, and has a love affair with him and has offered her saving to become his partner. Floyd has had a huge tax debt, and pseudo-friend Charlie is forcing him to sell the place very cheap. However, Louise finds a bridge that will be built soon and will increase the value of the bar. Really only know about this movie. I've never even heard of it before until I did this, but Jimmy is played by Elias Codius, who you later know as Casey Jones from Ninja Turtles, as well as other TV shows such as Oz. But not much more to say about it because I've never seen this film. Never heard anybody really talk about it, honestly. I don't even see a lot of really decent reviews for it. Let me just check here for a second here. I know this is... it doesn't really have a lot of good reviews on there. In fact, it's not that good at all. 27% critic-wise, 26% audience score. So maybe it's not that good as good as I'm making it out to be. So, excuse me. Anyway, on to the next movie, the canon film Hanna's War.
Star of the Academy Award-winning A Room with a View, Helena Bonham Carter, together with Academy Award winner Anne Bancroft, in the story of a heroine who in the dangerous times of 1944 took on an impossible mission and waged her own battle in a war against terrible injustice. From the acclaimed director, Peter Menet, Hanna's War.
It's a canon film in the 80s, and Helena Bonham Carter is not in this movie, nor did Peter Weir direct it, but they were both early in development for it, but they dropped out because of delays in filming, and then they realized that probably it's a canon film, and this is probably not going to do more damage to their careers than do anything for it if they actually went along with it. It's basically a biopic detailing the true story of Hanna Seens, who is a Hungarian schoolgirl with poetic aspirations, and in the face of rising anti-Semitic tensions in Budapest, she leaves with her mother Cataline, played by Ellen Burstyn, and her family behind to work at a kibbutz in then Palestine. Then she is recruited by the British Air Force for a dangerous mission, and they train volunteers and parachutes them over the native lands, and they agree to help downed flyers escape from enemy territories. Realizing it could be a suicide mission, she accepts the assignment because she feels her family still alive in Budapest may soon be taken to the death camps by the Nazis. During her mission, she's captured by the Nazis and ultimately undergoes a long, torturous interrogation process overseen by Captain Thomas Rosa, played by Donald Pleasance. And her courage and indomitable will in the face of torture, fear, and death will make her an inspiration to the Allies in the world. So, it kind of sounds like a precursor to something like Unbroken, which I think Unbroken is a much better movie, but this, I've never seen it before, and I don't think it has a lot of good reviews towards it. Much better. Anything with mixed reviews, I'd say, is a success for canon films, honestly, because they were really putting out some bad movies back then in the 80s. So I don't know. It could possibly be something interesting, but I wouldn't get my hopes up over it, considering what it is for canon films, but it's got the decent cast to maybe pull it through a little bit on praise on its acting alone, but yeah, other than that, though, I don't think that there's not that much there, honestly. But then again, I haven't seen it, so that's Hanna's War. So let's go ahead and move on to the last movie, and that is Amsterdamned.
They've got to find him, catch him, or kill him, because time is running out. Vestron Pictures presents Amsterdam.
I don't know why I'm saying it that way. I just find that much funnier to say than the regular way to say it, like Amsterdamned. I mean, that sounds good and all, but Amsterdam sounds a little bit more amusing. But what would you expect more from a film that's written, directed, and composed by a guy named Dick Maas, who I've never even heard of, but that's just kind of a funny name. You basically have a plot revolving around a serial killer who uses the famed canals of the Dutch capital to murder random people, one of which involves a detective's girlfriend linking him to the murder. So I think you can kind of tell where that's going to go, but never seen it before, so I can't really say too much about it. So I'll just say one more thing, and that is Amsterdamned. So with that said, that wraps up the first edition of Time About the Movies Flashback. When we meet next week, we'll look at the weekend of November 18th. Land Before Time and Oliver and Company came out that same weekend, but we've already covered those movies. There's still 4 movies here we can look at, including High Spirits, another film with Steve Guttenberg in it, Fresh Horses, 1969, and The Chocolate War. So we'll look at those 4 films on the next episode. But in the meantime, if you like this and you want to see more videos like this, please hit the like and subscribe button. Check out the playlist featuring these episodes that will be coming in the weeks to come, as well as take a look at an episode of the original Time About the Movies as well on the next page. So, thanks for watching this first episode, and I'll see you guys next week for another one. So until then, take care.